My name is Shailen Tuli. I am a developer programs engineer at Google. I work on Dart. And off late, I've been playing with Polymer. And so this talk is going to start off with an introduction to Dart, since I realize a lot of you don't actually know much about Dart. And then we'll quickly move into writing web applications with Dart and Polymer. I expect the talk will go about half an hour, and then we'll have time for questions. And after that, you can still find me and ask me whatever you want. OK, so first of all, why Dart? Why is Google expending all these resources in creating a new language, a new platform? Mostly because we believe that programming for the web is just too damn hard. Web applications often lack really good program structure. They start slowly, they run unpredictably. There's lack of really good tooling in the web platform, and there's a lack of standard libraries. Anyone who develops for the web sees this and lives with this all the time. So that's where Dart comes in and hopefully rescues things. So we believe in the Dart project that writing web apps should not be actually that different than writing native apps in terms of functionality, in terms of the kind of performance you can expect, and in terms of your developer experience, the ease of development. Right now, building anything other than trivial web applications is actually pretty hard. Building anything ambitious is damn hard. And we believe that shouldn't have to be the case. You shouldn't have to be a superhero to write great, ambitious web applications. So, question I get asked a lot, can you use Dart today? Yep, absolutely. There are two ways to run Dart code. One is through our Dart to JS compiler. So you write your Dart code, you press a simple button, it compiles it to JavaScript, and then you can deploy that anywhere JavaScript runs. The compiled JavaScript runs pretty well performance-wise. On some benchmarks, it's a little slower than handwritten JavaScript. On some benchmarks, it's a little faster. But there isn't any real penalty to be paid for writing Dart and then compiling it to JavaScript. The other way you can run your Dart code is in development mode with Dartium. So what is Dartium? Dartium is basically a build of Chromium with the Dart VM in it. Dart is different than other technologies that compile to JavaScript in that it comes with its own virtual machine. And when you get the SDK, you get the Dart editor, you get a build of Chromium with the Dart VM in it, so you can see what that experience is like playing with that. The VM is blazing fast. It's the VM team, in fact, the Dart project itself is led by the people who created V8, Google Chrome's JavaScript engine. And right now, our internal benchmarks show the VM clocking about twice as fast as JavaScript running in V8. And startup times are also substantially faster. Now, the Dart VM is not yet in Chrome. I mean, we give you sort of an experimental build of Chromium. We expect in the not-so-distant future, it will be in Chrome. And when that happens, we believe that will be a substantial game changer for the web platform. OK, so a little bit of a Dart overview. Dart is, of course, a language. It comes with rich libraries. It comes with a package manager. It has its own editor. Dart is very, very toolable. It's possible to statically analyze Dart code in a very straightforward way, so it makes it very toolable. It has a very fast VM, as I already said. And kind of an obvious point, but I'll emphasize it, it's all open source. People refer to Dart often as Google Dart. I can see why they do that, since Google is such a big backer of Dart. But it's an open source project. In fact, even our language design meeting notes are all put out for the world to see. There's not a lot of secretive stuff here. And an important point of Dart is it's a very familiar, unsurprising language. You can learn Dart really quickly. It's class-based, single inheritance, object-oriented language, nothing terribly radical about that. It has implicit interfaces. It has optional static typing, and I will emphasize optional. If you come from a background of Java, C++, C#, other languages where types are your bread and butter, you can use types very productively in Dart. If types get in your way, if you're a diehard JavaScripter and the idea of putting string before something is unappealing to you, you can put var before it. So there's something for everyone. Dart is a very unsurprising language. It has unsurprising scoping rules, and it has closures that work kind of normally. It has a concurrency model that's similar to Erlang's. It's based on message passing. And I think, most importantly, Dart is not designed to be a flashy language. It's designed to be a familiar language. So I would say in the continuum of things where Java is sort of very structured, very staid, and JavaScript is very dynamic, I think Dart actually lands somewhere nicely in between those two extremes. It's not quite as verbose as Java, but it's not quite as dynamic as JavaScript. We'll look at Dart code as we go along, but I will sort of now start segueing into building web applications with Dart. Now, there are lots of ways to build web applications with Dart. You can build them straight HTML, raw HTML in Dart. We have a great Dart HTML library. There is Polymer, and of course that's what I'm going to be talking about mostly. And Angular has now a port for Dart, so you can use Angular too. And we hope the choices will only increase as we go forward. So now I'm going to be talking mostly about Polymer, but we'll go in and out talking about Dart as well. So let's just start off. What is Polymer? I will actually just read, just so I don't screw this up, exactly what it says on their website. Polymer is a new type of library for the web, built on top of web components, and designed to leverage the evolving web platform on modern browsers. Okay, what does that mean? All right, let's look at it again. Polymer is new. Yep, it's brand new. In fact, on my way here, I stopped by at the Google office in San Francisco. I ran into one of the guys, and he said, be sure to tell them it's not completely ready. I said, I will be sure to tell them. So here it is. It's brand new. It's evolving. It's in the works. It's a type of library. I think I struggled with that. I didn't quite know what to call it. It's not a framework in the way that Backbone is a framework or Ember is a framework. It's sort of a whole ecosystem built for the web. And it's built on top of Web Components, which is an evolving standard. It's actually mostly set. And you should Google it and read up more about it. A lot of my talk is going to be talking about Web Components and how they are very integral to working with Polymer. And it's designed to leverage the evolving web platform. This is about the web going forward. We'll talk about the different stacks in the whole Polymer ecosystem. But basically, Polymer is working with browser vendors to see what can be done to make the web great as we go forward, and then how much of that can be done today. We'll talk more about that. And it works on modern browsers. So fans of IE8, I'm sorry, this is for the modern web. It works for modern browsers. They just had to cut it off somewhere. They decided to have their cutoffs. Okay, so Polymer stack. Lots of colors. I didn't make this picture, though it's on the Polymer project's homepage. It's very good. So if you look way down at the bottom, you see what the native implementation is, what the browsers give you today. So there's a whole bunch of stuff built in that the browsers support. After that is the foundation layer. And you'll see a bunch of items there. And frankly, this list could actually be longer. You have mutation observers, shadow DOM, HTML imports, blah, blah, blah. Lots of stuff. I'm not going to be talking about all of these, but I will talk about some of these things. Now, why is this in red? Because we want to show that this is ready to use today, whether using Polymer with JavaScript or Polymer with Dart. but it is not always natively supported in the browser. There are polyfills for this. So the aim is, as the browser support for all these sort of underlying technologies that make up Polymer, as the browser support for this stuff increases, the need for polyfills goes away, and you're back to see this thing, but with the red stuff all replaced by the gray. That is the plan. It may take a couple of years for this to happen, but it's not something that you as developers have to worry that much about. You can use this now. It's just that a lot of the underlying stuff may be polyfills. On top of that foundational layer, in sort of the yellow-orange color up there where it says Polymer.js, is an opinionated library that tells you what it considers the best way to use the foundational layer. What's the best way to use the shadow DOM? What's the best way to do data binding, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff is available to you today also. If you are a Polymer.js enthusiast, or whether you're working with Polymer and Dart, you can use this stuff. There is parity on this. So basically, the Polymer project is being developed mostly within Chrome, but with a lot of talk to other browser vendors, to other people. And there's a great deal of interest in making sure that all that foundational stuff that you saw becomes widely supported natively in the browser. So there's standards committees involved, et cetera, et cetera. They want to just make sure this is how we build apps as we go forward. But you don't have to wait. You can do it now. So I'm on the Dart team. I happen to like coding in Dart. I also actually like coding in JavaScript. But off late, I've been coding mostly in Dart. And so now I'm going to sort of talk about Polymer and Dart. But frankly, whether your interest is in Polymer or Polymer and Dart or just Dart, I think there should be, I hope there will be enough for everyone in my talk. OK, so what is Polymer? It's awesome. It really is. It's mind-blowingly awesome. My talk may not fully justify that, but try it yourself and you'll see. But it is under development. Buyer beware. If you like living on the edge, go ahead, jump in, do whatever you have to with Polymer. But we are not in the business of telling you whether this is ready for your business or not ready for your business. That is something you have to decide. But definitely try it and give us your feedback. So I'll give you a broad overview of Polymer. So Polymer, the folks who are making Polymer looked at where the web has been for the last decade or so and try to gauge what worked well, what didn't work well, what we can do better, et cetera. So one of the things that's clearly a big winner is markup. It's everywhere. It's damn easy. Everyone gets it. Markup is HTML, so that's great. We'll build on that. And then there's the DOM, which is, you know, a little bit more complicated. It's sort of a success in one way, but a slightly mixed success. So the Polymer people said, OK, we'll use markup. We'll clean up the DOM. And we'll build stuff on that. Now, this is actually a tectonic shift in our current thinking of the web. I mean, for the last 5 years, the idea has been to get away from markup, to get away from the DOM, to get into your models, views, controllers, what have you, and go to the DOM. You know, I have my backbone, whatever. I need to render it. I go to the DOM. I try not to think too much about it. I touch it, and I leave it. In Polymer, not so much. We believe in a declarative style. The DOM is a first-class citizen, and markup is very, very important. We believe all of that stuff is good. So before, you could use existing elements. We all build web apps. We use divs and text areas. Somebody made those. Great. With Polymer, you get to create your own elements, and you get to use them. Now, so for instance, I write some code, some Dart code, as it happens, and define an element. We'll talk about how that's done in a little bit. Call it my element, and you can use it. Nothing surprising about this. You can use it just like you would use a div or a text area. You can pass it attributes. This is typically how we send data to an element. You can do that with Polymer elements, custom elements with Polymer, defined with Polymer. And you can attach event handlers. And this is how you send stuff out of elements. Send data in with attributes, send data out with events. Standard stuff, we do it all the time with divs, text areas, inputs, what have you. Now you get to define your own semantically meaningful elements and get to do all that cool stuff. So there are 5 important parts to Polymer that I'll talk about. There are many more parts to Polymer that others will talk about, but this is what I'm going to talk about. Creating your own elements. This is very central. This is sort of existentially central to Polymer. Using the template tag for real HTML templates. Encapsulation using shadow DOM. Reusing your stuff with HTML imports. And model view binding. So the first 4 of these are part of Web Components. If you Google for Web Components, if you're not familiar with that, and read up about Web Components, you will see they talk about creating elements, using the template tag, importing stuff, and they talk a lot about the shadow DOM. Model view binding is about, remember I said there was an opinionated layer on how to use the foundational stuff. That's Polymer's opinionated layer of how you can keep your data and the UI synced up. Again, we'll look at a lot of examples of that. So the 5 big parts of Polymer: creating your own elements, extending existing elements. Let's look at something like this. We have ordered lists. We have unordered list. What about a searchable list? It's where you would use the tag that I have there to define a list that you could then search. Not an entirely useless element, right? I can see pretty good uses for it. So what would that look like? Let me go into Dart editor. I mentioned Dart is toolable. It comes with an editor. There it is. And I will go into searchable list and do a demo. There's a list, and it happens to have this whole thing. Everything that you see is an element. It's just a list, nothing fancy. And it comes with a little input at the top. And you can search for it, and boom, etc. Nothing radical. This is a hello world level example. This is dead simple Polymer 101 type of example, where I would like to have lists which are searchable, so I make an element called searchable list. Now, how do I do that? Okay, so we're going to look at this code again after we've done a little bit of talking. But fundamentally, I define a Polymer element. Can everyone see that? Is that big enough? Okay. I define a Polymer element. It's called, as I advertised, searchable list. You can pass some data to it, which is just, in this case, a list of fruits. It's got a template tag inside it. We'll talk lots more about the template tag and how awesome it is. And it has a script. It's not script.java-JavaScript. It happens to be a Dart script. And what does a Dart script have? It's the same thing, but now defined as a Dart class. That subclass is a Polymer element. And then it's got a bunch of code, including, crucially, very exhaustive 3 lines of code for how you can do search. We'll talk about that, too, in a bit. And I write a little app to show you. It's called My App, really original. And I import searchable list into that, and then I use it, passing it some data. So that, if you've never written anything with Polymer, this is your first. I didn't want to write a hello world because that's not real world. This is kind of getting there, but it's still a very, very basic example. I wouldn't advise any of you to build something like this and quit your day jobs to promote this as a startup. Not that much. All right. Let's get back here. So that's a basic element. Now, what does having elements give you? Well, before I answer that, anyone know where this beautiful markup is from? It's Gmail. How many people here use Gmail? Yeah, it's a great product. A lot of people use it. This is what it looks like. When you pull up the hood and you look at the markup, this is what it looks like. I changed it to div soup because div hell sounded a little excessive, but it's actually div hell. When you look at this markup, there is nothing semantic about it. There is no sense of what this is doing. And you know, these are great engineers who are writing this. This is the best, one of the best web applications that exists. But this is what it looks like. With Polymer, you could rewrite Gmail. You would need to spend a lot of time because Gmail is a pretty rich application. But your markup could look like this. You could have an email messages tag instead of a UL. And you could have an email message tag instead of an LI, for instance. And you could pass attributes to it, IDs of your emails, or the state that of the email. You could attach handlers to it of some kind. When somebody clicks on it, something happens. When somebody checks something, something happens. But ask yourself, what is more meaningful to you as a developer, this or this? This is the power of Polymer. And this is available to you now. So that's sort of the overview, creating your own elements. Now, you saw that I used the template tag. How many people are familiar with the template tag and what it does? Great. So now I get to tell all of you what it does. It's not a secret. Templating is very important to us as programmers, right? But there is no template tag, or there hasn't been until now, natively in HTML. So let's talk what happens when you don't have the template tag. Here's some markup. You have a div, you give it an ID, and it's hidden. It's got an image inside it, some more div, another div inside it, and so on. Now, in one level, this is good. This is very clear. This is something everyone can grok, and it works. But it's actually hugely problematic. And it's problematic on two fundamental levels. First, your div is hidden, but you are paying for the contents of that div, even though you don't show that content to the user. So in a rich, one-page internet application, there's a lot of stuff like this that you don't immediately want to show to the user. And so you are stuck with having something where you are paying for the resources that you don't actually show the user. The second problem is this kind of stuff is pretty hard to style, right? ID equals my div. Good. So now in your CSS or your multiple CSS files, you define your CSS scope down to ID equals my div. And you really hope nobody else does that, right? You really hope nobody else has an ID equals my div. You have all sorts of rules for making this work out. But all in all, that kind of CSS styling, A, is poor for performance, deeply scoped CSS, and it's fragile. You're relying on conventions and good behavior of developers. Don't bet on that stuff, right? You want something a little bit more than that. So Polymer gives you that. Here's a Polymer template. It's basically the same thing. It's got an ID. It's got some styles inside it. We'll talk about that in a second. It's got an image and a div and all that. Now what's different about this? The DOM is parsed, but it is not rendered. Parsed, but not rendered. You pay only for the parsing, which is just very, very little. But the image doesn't load, scripts don't run, any CSS in there is not run, none of that. This is inert markup. You just throw it in there, and it sits there unless you decide you want to do something with it. And Polymer gives you lots of tools to make this inert markup come alive. So for instance, you could have a wrapper template with an if something equals something. In this case, it says, if signed agreement evaluates to true, make this template come alive. Otherwise, leave it inert, let it lie there, sleeping, with no cost to you. So a lot of great stuff can go in your markup, and you don't pay upfront for it. Very powerful. So we talked about creating elements. We just looked at the template tag and how extremely central that is to creating elements. Let's just now talk briefly about encapsulation using Shadow DOM. So first of all, Shadow DOM is this big mysterious topic. It also, just because of the word shadow in there, it conjures up some weird sort of mysterious connotations. It's actually fairly straightforward stuff. But why do we need it? Encapsulation is a basic tenet of object-oriented programming. For us as programmers, this is our bread and butter. And we don't have it in the web. Yeah, well, except when you use an iframe. Then you have encapsulation. But you have encapsulation that's bulky and really hard to interact with. But generally, we don't have encapsulation until now. Shadow DOM and Polymer give you real encapsulation, much in the way that you would expect if you were writing a Java or C++ app for a native platform. So, is this a new idea? No. This has actually been around for a while, and the browser vendors have just not told us about it. But once I show you a couple of examples, anything mysterious about the shadow DOM, anything shadowy about it, will be gone. So have a look here. The range element. Input type equals range. Here we go. So right away, when I look at this, I can tell that this is sort of a complex or a compound element. There's a circle, there's a bar, but I get to not really understand how that is put together. Let's go into DevTools. So here we are. Is that big enough for people to read? Yeah? And I get to see nothing except that it's an input type equals range. And that's basically it. Okay, so now let's go see the stuff the browser vendors have been hiding from us. So you go into your settings and say, turn show shadow DOM on. And now let's go back and look at the input. You see there's something I can expand. Input type equals range actually has some shadow stuff in it. Here, look at that document fragment. Inside there is a div. Inside there is another div with something called part equals WebKit slider runnable track. I don't actually know what that is. But anyway, I don't need to know what all that is when I'm using this. I just get to write input type equals range, and then it just works. So back to our examples here. Let's look at the video tag. Now, you would imagine something like this. Again, I just get to write a simple HTML tag, but you would imagine this is reasonably more complicated. Now that we have Shadow DOM enabled, let's go look at what's going on in here. And sure enough, I just get to say video ID equals this, SR equals this, but in there is a whole world. And I'm closing things, not opening them. Oh, okay. Lots of divs, divs inside divs, inputs in there, all this stuff. But again, this stuff is encapsulated away. You don't, as the end user, you don't worry about this. You just use the video tag. So now, and actually before I closing, even the humble text area actually comes with a little bit of a shadow DOM. If you inspect a text area with shadow DOM enabled in your DevTools, you'll see there's a little bit more there than just a little thing. So what does this get you? I said encapsulation is damn important to us. What does this get you in terms of, if you're, let's say you're a designer, you write CSS for a living. I'll give you a dead simple example. Again, not a very profound app. It just shows two headlines. One is in green, one isn't. The one in green is straight markup on my index.html. It's just an H1. The one in black is inside a Polymer element. The page has a style that says H1s should be green. And you can see the Polymer element is encapsulated away. The styles from outside do not permeate it. Now think of all the tricks and hacks you have to do to try to simulate this kind of encapsulation if you're a web designer. We give this to you. And you may be wondering, okay, well that's great, but what about the cascade and cascading style sheets? What if I actually want to go in there? Not a problem. If you look at the Dart code for this, look at this one line which says apply author styles equals false, which is basically a more technical way of saying don't allow any outside styles in. If you change that to true and you run the app, I ran the wrong app, sorry. When you run the app, come on, it's downloading a proxy script. Come on, come on. All right, there we go. They're both green now. And in that spectrum, that wide spectrum of allowing no styles from outside and allowing every style from outside, there's a lot of options in between for you to allow, to make your element interact with the environment that it's going to be used in. Good stuff. Okay, back to my talk. And the fourth of the 5 things is reusing stuff that you've built. You build something, you build a searchable list once, you don't want to build it again. You want to reuse things. So how do you do that? Actually, so stay here. You use very familiar looking syntax. Link, rel equals, import, href equals whatever my element is. Straightforward stuff. That's it. Once you import an element, you get to use it down here. This is exactly what we did when we started off with looking at that searchable list. Notice it imports my app, which is my little demo app for you, and my app imports searchable list. And so elements can contain elements, and you can reuse as much as you like. Going forward, so that's all sort of web component-y stuff. I would really urge you to go look at this stuff and see how much of this speaks to you. But web components is a very, very exciting area. Not a lot of it, about it is known, so I would really urge, go read up about it, and I think a lot of the stuff that you've heard me talk about today will sort of be placed into sort of better perspective if you do that. So now, model view binding. Let's say you want to make a to-do list or a task manager. So you create a task class, and your tasks have titles, which are strings, plain stuff. And you want to have some way of having this represented as a Polymer element. So you create a Polymer element. Now, Polymer elements will typically have 2 files, a Dart code file and an HTML file, and those two go together. You can actually put them in one file, but that's the custom. So here's the Dart code. You declare the element, and you say that its subclass is Polymer element, and it watches a task. See that declaration, at observable? It's observing that object, that task that has a title, etc. And in the markup, once you do that, once you make something observable, you don't have to do much to keep your data and the UI synced up. So look at the first line of the markup. It says text, and inside those double curlies, it says task.title, which basically means somewhere in there I've defined a task object, show its title here. And every time that task object changes, this gets updated automatically. You don't have to do that. Polymer does it for you. But it actually gets better than that. The binding is both ways, works both ways. So look at the next line, the input. Now, it's very common if you have a text field to try to modify that using an input type equals text or a text area. So it's a title. Let's just say we use an input type equals text. The value of that is bound to the title of the task object. So when you type something in here and you change the value and you put something into that input, it changes the data. When some other part of your code changes the data, it refreshes automatically in the UI. Very, very much automatic once you declare the bindings. So we talked about the big 5 of Polymer. We talked about how the DOM is damn important. And we talked about how if you just do the plumbing right, the model view binding happens automatically for you. So we started with a searchable list. Let's go back and look at that code again. Again, not because it's a profound app. This is Hello World. But it is pretty good to look at for how you do things. All right, so searchable list extends Polymer element. I'm actually going to go through this line by line. We talked about apply author styles. It says basically allow the styles from outside to permeate. We're OK with that. It has a string, the search parameter, what you type into the input. Notice I make it at observable. That means if there is a binding for it in the HTML, which we will look at, that and this are synced up. That's it. Then I have some data, which is a list of fruits. And then I have another list, which is a list of the results, the search results. And that too is marked observable, meaning when that list changes, go to the markup and update it. Once you declare, so basically all we've done is declared 3 fields and sprinkled some magic pixel dust on them and said, now bind them with the HTML. That's it. Look at the HTML. It's a Polymer element. It's got a template, some divs for making bootstrap work, and here's the input. Type equals text, value equals curly curly search param. So when you type in this, the search param variable that you defined in the model, in the Polymer, in the Dart code, gets updated in real time. And when that happens on key up, the search method that was defined there is called. Now, Google's a search company, so you would think search is really, really important. Well, it is. But with Polymer, it is 3 lines of code. We're maintaining 2 lists, list of all our data and the list of search results. And we're saying, okay, clear the results and then find all the matching items and put them back into results. That's it. Real profound stuff. 2, 3 lines of code. And that automatically, notice that you're not dealing with the DOM. Once you do the basic declaration in the DOM, you no longer have to deal with it. You're dealing with data. This is model-centric, data-centric view of thinking about applications. So I put something into results, and it automatically updates. Go back into the list again, and then here's our UL, which says template, repeat, result and results, and then you show the result. That's it. Really, really, really simple stuff. But once you declare the bindings, you must declare them, but once you declare them correctly, you don't have to touch the DOM very much at all. Polymer does all the upgrading for you. So let's look at another example. I started off earlier, or I mentioned earlier, building a task manager where task has a title. So here's an app that I built that you can have a look at. It's a poor man's version of Pivotal Tracker, which I'm a big fan of. I said, okay, how much of Pivotal Tracker can I make in a few hours? This is what you got. It's a task tracker, and it allows you to add tasks, and it buckets them into current tasks, pending tasks, completed tasks, and it allows you to delete things and edit things. It's a CRUD app, create, read, update, delete. So in this, there is a single, why don't we see the app actually? Here's the app. I can add a task, speak slowly. I can create it, and sure enough, speak slowly is there. Speak slowly now. And sure enough, it's there. And I can say, this is not pending, this is a current task. Boom, off it goes. It's off from pending and into current. Or I can say, I am already speaking slowly, damn it, go away. And there it is. Right? A basic CRUD app. So how is this put together? Again, once you do the bindings that Polymer tells you to do, you can work almost exclusively at the data layer. So there is a single list. This is a single source of truth in this application. It's called tasks. And I put all my tasks in that, and I take away tasks from that, etc. And I run code that every time tasks changes, resort the buckets. Make sure the current tasks go into one list, pending tasks into another, completed tasks into third. Polymer gives you ways to observe objects for changes. So I'm saying my task list is my central source of data. When that task list changes, do a bunch of things. So when I need to add a task, what do? I go create a task, and I throw it into that list. Because that triggers a change in the list, the buckets get recalculated. It says, oh, this task is marked pending. Throw it in that bucket, not that one. When I delete a task, I just take it out of that list. It's really as simple as finding the list, and deleting the task from it. I never have to go to the DOM. And when I update the status of a task, when I make a current task or a pending task a current one, like I did when I showed you, it's pretty simple. Take it out of tasks, change its status, throw it back. It will automatically go to the right bucket. When your framework makes it crazy easy to observe changes and reflect them in the DOM, you don't have to do much work. This entire app with form validation, with a search function, everything, was a few hours of work. And I'm not an especially fast coder. This was just pretty easy with Polymer. So, sort of trying to wrap up now. I've talked a lot. We're almost out of time. Polymer is awesome, but it is under development. Buyer beware. Please try it, whether you try it with JavaScript or you try it with Dart. I'd like you to try it with Dart, but try it either way. And give us feedback. Some links, I'll go through these quickly, and we'll have a few minutes for questions, but I'm around. You can talk to me afterwards. Go to the Polymer project. Lots of good stuff there. This should be your, if you're interested in Polymer, go there and go there often. Polymer Dart is, there's a landing page for all sort of the Dart-related stuff and Polymer. There's a nice tutorial that gets you started. There's a lot of samples, including some of the samples that I demoed that you can find on dartlang.org samples. And my colleague, Seth Ladd, has written a bunch of mini samples, like 4 or 5 lines, 6 lines, which show various ways to use Polymer. I use this stuff and I'm stuck. It's good stuff. You should go use it. And I guess that's it. That's the end. Can I go back? I will make these slides available, but sure. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. This is, I was told to warn people that this would be like drinking from a fire hose. I hope it was. That was intentional. I only have so much time, and I have a lot of information to give you, and we barely scratched the surface of this stuff. So please try, fiddle around with things, see how it feels, file bugs, and help us make this good. Okay, thank you. We have a few minutes for questions if anyone has anything. Yep.
Is this supposed to be an alternative to Angular, or is it supposed to play nice with Angular?
Is this an alternative to Angular? I honestly don't know how to answer that. I think Angular and Polymer are both things that fostered inside Google. They surf on very similar terrain, and they try to do things. I know they're talking a lot to each other, and I think the way to think about it is that Polymer is probably a more lower layer that maybe down the road Angular could be built on, or built on some parts of Polymer, or use some parts of Polymer. Polymer comes a la carte. You don't have to use all of it. You can use just some part of it.
A lot of it seems very similar to Angular.
It is very similar to Angular in a lot of ways. Yeah, that you're quite correct in pointing that out. Yeah.
Do the existing implementations of Polymer that run in normal browsers support any of the magic, encapsulation, shadow DOM encapsulation?
Yes, you can use this stuff today. Yeah.
Is there some namespacing for Polymer elements?
Namespacing as in the way XML namespacing?
Something, yeah, that doesn't collide with other libraries?
I think there isn't, but this was a question I was asked last week too, so it's something that does come up. I think we're not quite at the point of having thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of Polymer elements floating out there colliding with each other, but it's a problem we'd like to have and solve. Yeah, in the back there?
Web Components, they're removing the element tag as a mechanism for using them. Is Polymer moving towards removing an element as a setup to sort of keep itself in sync with Web Component development, or is that not happening?
Yes. The question is Polymer keeping itself in sync with the changing parts of Web Components? The answer is yes, it is. I don't know specifically about that particular detail, But generally, the web components people are the Polymer people. So, anyway, this, by the way, some stickers and swag up here. I have lots more in my bag.
And do you have a URL for your presentation?
You know, it's not on the web yet, but I will post it. This is recorded, I believe, and I believe the slides will be posted at some point. I will make sure that's publicly broadcast out.
On your blog or just on this conference?
On dartlang.org.
On Dartlang, okay, gotcha.
It might take us a day or two to get there.